Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with another episode of our weekly P&Q&C&A&T. This is season 6, episode 13. The name, which initially started out as Q&A, has sort of morphed into a monstrosity, which we sometimes mess up or forget, and we rarely explain in full. And when we do, it is normally off the cuff. But today, I think you have a little something that you've prepared for us.
Sure, it's like, the A is for Apple and B is for, so here we go. P is for podcast because our patrons on Patreon have made it worth giving up ad revenue to allow everyone the option to listen to this as just audio without being tied to YouTube.
Yeah, and link in the description if you are on the YouTube video and looking to access it in that format.
Right. Q is for questions, which is how this all started when we pulled questions from the comments on our YouTube videos. C is for comments because not everyone who says something worth talking about is asking a question.
Mm-hmm.
A is for answers, which we have lots of, but they're not always good. So we make up for in quantity what we lack in quality.
And I would argue that our frequency of answers has maybe even decreased over time.
And we've got
probably
a lot of videos.
Yeah, we have a ton of videos, but I think our frequency of answers, the questions that we answer per video, has gone way down, and part of the reason for that is the last letter.
Is T. T is for talking, because sometimes we just ramble, and now that we're doing this video in separate locations, it gives us an excuse to talk about the things that we found interesting over the last week.
Yeah, so we make up for quantity. So we make up for quality of answers with quantity of just us saying things, and sometimes they're answers. And very frequently, they also don't even really resemble answers.
This is true. All right, so speaking of recent things that are just talking, it's not really an answer to anything. I've heard this term before, and you know what spinster means, right?
You know what? I think we should take a step back for a moment and say, I did. And I didn't know what you were about to tell me, but we just had a full start of our recording where after about 9 minutes in, I did a quick check and realized that for some reason my audio wasn't picking up. So now I do, but we're gonna go back and I'm gonna pretend for a moment. I'm gonna put myself back in time about 9 minutes, and I'm gonna say yes, I have heard the term spinster. And about 9 minutes ago, what I believed it meant was like an older woman, and I had sort of like cat lady associations with it. I feel like spinster is maybe like an cat lady associations, and also sort of like an old terminology association, like not a term that I hear a lot nowadays.
So I'm a lousy actor, and what I will do, I guess, is maybe I'll just rehash the conversation with it, try and pretend that it's happening. Oh, look. All right, so Wonder Woman is totally the mother box. See how many times in a row Raven is dodging the special 2 over and over again. I mean, they're coming in with not only 3 bars, but I think Superman might come in potentially with our Superman, New 52, will come in with all of his passive maxing out his attack. Like, that is ridiculous. Blink is only supposed to happen, what? It's less than 30%.
Yeah, I think it's pretty low. I don't remember exactly, but yeah.
That is ridiculous. Okay, so a spinster is something very specific. And the first time I heard the term was reading Anne of Green Gables, and I know that Marilla Cuthbert was a spinster.
And I don't know what that means. I also read Anne of Green Gables at one point, but I no longer remember Marilla Cuthbert even a little bit.
All right, so that was the sister in the brother-sister duo that adopted Anne. And so the idea, the connotation is it's an older woman who never got married. And so it's supposed to reflect poorly on her because somehow being married is real important, and being married young is normal, and not being married is somehow odd. So here's the problem, is that I saw this on Twitter, and then when I try to look up, not the idea of spinster, but what I'm about to tell you about why it's interesting is that I couldn't find any actual references. So a spinster is supposed to be somebody who's unmarried, a woman who's unmarried between the age of 23 and 26. I mean, there's sort of the associated male term, which is bachelor, but there's not the same negative connotation. And so if you were older, or you were expected to be married by the time you're 23, and if you weren't, somehow there's something wrong with you. And so here's the kicker. Here's the news, or not news, but the new bit I found out was that there's a cutoff. Top end is 26 because if you're older than 26 and you're still not married, the term is no longer spinster, but it's thornback.
Yeah, and that was and still is a surprise to me. It was 10 minutes ago, and remains surprising and new information.
All right, but what's crazy about that? So, I get the image of like a porcupine or a triceratops or something, right? Like something,
Yeah.
or maybe even Godzilla, right? Because he's got all those spines along his back. And it's crazy because when I try to look it up to see if there's any reference, because you see it on Twitter, that's not the best or most reliable of resources, and everything I Google references back to that particular tweet,
which means that it is not particularly reputable as a source. It's possible, but it's as far as actual research goes, it's not there. And my response was and still is to that: big if true.
All right, so explain that again, because you explained it to me.
For a second time. Yeah, okay, so this is the second explanation for the benefit of the audience who doesn't know, because you are now informed. But it's like a joke saying, I think it had its origin in news. And basically it's like when something's totally unsubstantiated. So when somebody says their opinion on something, and it is like, like this information, which it would be big if true, or when somebody says like there's rumors of something happening. So it's just a good sort of response to when somebody says something that is interesting, or maybe significant, but also maybe total crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's quite possible, because this is such obscure information, that the reason all the hits are recent is just because nobody cared before. Yeah,
it's possible that this is a known linguistic fact, right? An etymological fact, right? And it's just been, like buried in like textbooks for like a 4th year course or something, or in the minds of academics, and this is just somebody on Twitter sharing that information.
Yeah, so this is going to be sort of like, so the idea, I really want to use I was saying earlier, I really want to use your term big if true, because I like the way it sounds. And I know what's going to happen is I'm just going to use it wrong. Although in the case of Overton window, which we talked about before, I wasn't using it wrong because it's not specifically political discourse, but it's also any kind of topic where you can shift what's the acceptable kind of
like conversation.
Yeah, what the normal part or the normal sort of area of discourse is.
Yeah.
And by shifting the over to window, you can get you sort of reestablish what the norm is.
Yeah. Okay. So then there you go. That's a retraction, I guess, that needs to be made on my part, which is that you use the term Overton window totally correctly. So there you go.
Which is kind of cool. So I'm just looking for opportunities now to use big if true.
I'll try to say a lot of stuff that is possibly interesting, but also possibly totally false.
Yeah, and I'll just use I guess the only way I can use it incorrectly is if I try to apply it to situations that aren't really that spectacular.
Yeah, some situations that either aren't that spectacular, or the term if true doesn't really apply in a meaningful way, right?
See, I'm going to be like Michael Scott in The Office. That's what she said.
Oh, yeah.
Big if true.
Big if true. There we go.
We should get to our first question.
Yeah, our first question comes from Karlos, and that's spelled with a C and then a K. And there they say, and then they end off with a question. I've been going back and forth with Warner Brothers. The battle mode is locked out. The survivor mode and multiplayer crash after every victory. I was willing to live with battle mode being locked out. And then they just kind of move on from here, but I'm assuming there was like an implied like survivor mode and multiplayer mode crashing means that there's basically no game left in this game.
Yeah.
And they continue and say, I have every silver and bronze is at 60 Elite 10, most of all the gold are the same. Kick-ass gears. I've been offered 3 characters that I would like to have restored to a new account, including level up to 50 and promotion level up to Elite 7. I will also get a credit for and then this is 250.00, so my North American interpretation is $250, but this could really be any sort of amount of money depending on where this person is from. And how decimal point notation works in their particular culture. So 250 or 25,000, it's 250.00 units of currency my grandson talked me into buying when he started playing. My question, which characters should I go with metal?
Yeah, so even before we get into the answer, I think it feels like this is something new. I don't know that they were doing this before, and it isn't really objectively generous, but it feels generous compared to what they used to do, which was basically say, yeah, there's nothing we can do, you're on your own.
Yeah, because I know for people getting banned, that was one thing. But for people who lost their account data, it's weird. And you would think that if that they would have some sort of server information to be able to restore your account.
Right. I mean, and to Karlos, I mean, I feel really bad that you lost your time and money. Although it sounds like they are trying to make good on it.
As far as the money goes, at least.
Yeah, so, I mean, to me, just to answer the question, to me the priority would be for things that are otherwise hard to get. Not to just focus on stuff that's good, but stuff that if you play it again and you try to make progress, it would take you a really long time. So, for example, medals at level 50 Elite 7 would be really good for this because how much work it would take to otherwise get. I think it's now, 25 copies to get them to Elite 7.
Yeah.
You can't buy them with credits directly.
And getting them to Elite 7 is all you'd actually need to get them to.
Right. Yeah, that would be the maximum. Right, exactly. So, but unfortunately, not all the medals are good. I mean, the best would be Batman Ninja Catwoman. And if you were going to use her as a starting point, because not only is she good, but she's also really difficult to get, because Nth Metal is hard to farm, and it's still a random drop.
Yeah.
Then maybe have Batman Ninja Nightwing for a teammate, maybe New 52 Shazam, and that's 3 medals. But the other consideration is it's not just medals that are hard to get, because to me, maybe, Shazam's interesting, but he's not the best. Maybe somebody else who's also hard to get, but stronger, like Arkham Knight Batman.
Yeah.
Because he's never had a challenge. He's never been in a multiplayer reward. He's only ever been a random drop in a pack that isn't there all the time.
Yeah.
And he's really good as a single character. Or maybe even get like a multiplayer exclusive, right? Because those will take months or years depending on when they recycle certain characters.
Yeah. The good news is for restarting with gold characters is that challenges are going to be or restarting with gold or metal characters, depending on what you pick, I guess, is that beating challenges is going to be a lot easier for you, and it's going to be more like a question of whether or not you have the right character requirements.
Yeah, and this is why it gets so hard too, right? When we talk about the different things that you can do, I guess it'll depend on how much patience you have, Karlos, for playing again to make progress, because here's the thing, you're going to have 3 really great characters, no gears.
Yeah.
So you're going to need both a team, because there's so many different tasks that you can do in the game, right? You'll need a team that can get you far in the offline mode, and that, to me, that includes challenges, so that you can get to grind credits to buy gear lockers to actually get gears. But you also need someone to get you pretty far in multiplayer to get the legendary gears that are multiplayer exclusives. So the good thing about multiplayer Survivor is matchmaking, which allows you to use store-bought silver and bronze teams. But gear is going to still be important to give you an advantage in the fights to make multiplayer Survivor not so tedious.
Yeah, for the actual, and you're not going to be able to use your characters that you're getting from this in multiplayer for a long time.
Yes, so that's the other thing too. You're going to have to think about who with only 3 characters that you're getting, you're going to have to end up maybe having some characters higher than you would like, because then you don't play them in multiplayer.
Yeah.
And maybe lower than you'd like, because you actually want to motor through the regular fights, the offline fights, to get to high enough level where, like Bonus Battle 6, where you can generate more credits, because 250 doesn't get you very far. I mean, and I don't want to, endorse hack content, but man, 250 would buy you like a huge amount of hack content.
That's
and I'm
true.
just curious. I mean, if Karlos would want to comment again, I'm just curious what Karlos bought for that 250 originally to start with,
or what he is going to be buying with it this time. And I think one thing, I guess, you're making a case for hacking. I can make a case against hacking. I mean, the case for hacking is obviously you wouldn't probably spend 250 to get whatever it is, whatever amount of stuff it is that you ended up with. But also, I don't think a hacker would have the same tendency as Warner Brothers to replace somebody's account with new content when they lost it.
That's true. It's almost like a what do you call it? Like a warranty.
Yeah, so you'd probably get more stuff, but worse
After
insurance,
sales care.
Yeah,
Customer service.
You get like worse product insurance, right?
Yeah. So I think that's really it. I think if I had to pick three, I'd definitely pick Batman, Ninja, Catwoman. And this would obviously be subject to change if the medals could not get 50 in Elite 7 and they do something lower. Mm-hmm. But I'd say Batman, Ninja, Catwoman. Probably, now that I've said it, probably Arkham Knight Batman.
Yeah.
And a Batman Ninja teammate to make Catwoman better, but because none of them are available now, because there's two Batman Ninjas that are challenges, although they're available there's like the Joker versus Batman Eternal Enemies pack, and Batman Ninja Nightwing. The third one. What do you think? The third one's hard because Batman Ninja Nightwing might be good just because he'd be hard to get otherwise, but it also means that you're not going to be able to use him online for a long time.
I don't know. Would getting some like Killing Joke Joker with Alliance credits?
That's not bad. It's just like I'm thinking how useful they are after. Like because I think of all the different characters that I'd want other than Batman Ninja Catwoman and Arkham Knight Batman, and everybody else requires a lot of good gears or very specific gear loadout to make them as special as they are. I mean, it's not that they're bad. It's just that they would be good instead of great.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to consider somebody else that would be worthwhile for sort of just rarity reasons, because I know there's no glitch for Alliance credits now, so that would be a little bit harder, but I also don't really keep track of how quickly that we generate them.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe, you know what? Batgirl. I think I'd like Batgirl. And she's gold, but her passive is so good that you can stick her on a whole bunch of different teams and make. She used to be the standard kind of. We'd have to recharge her all the time because we want to stick her on every single team. And early on, to have the bar of power for everybody makes a big difference in your fights.
Yeah.
So there we go. The only two I think we can say categorically, I think, agree on would be Batman Ninja Catwoman and Arkham Knight Batman. Yeah.
So there we go. That's probably good. And you have interspersed in between questions, you have something else that you wanted to talk about, I think?
Yeah. All right. So a week and a half ago, there was the whole scandal. Did you hear about this? Where there were rich people and celebrities, and sometimes I guess a combination of both, buying their way in for their children into university.
I hadn't heard about this, and by hadn't I mean I still haven't.
Okay, so the two big names that were attached to this were Felicity Huffman, who's an actress from Desperate Housewives, and Lori Loughlin, who's probably best known for being Aunt Becky in Full House, but she does a bunch of Hallmark stuff. Like she's in some sort of Hallmark TV special. You know, one of those small town
made for TV movies,
made
like
for TV.
Yeah, there's like they're in the middle of nowhere and they have some sort of like seasonal or event related thing. There's
and like, there's some sort of romantic kind of something, you know.
Yeah,
can you tell I have a lot of patience for this.
Probably somebody comes from the big city and has to adjust to their new way of living. Yeah, right. That kind of thing. The spin I'm seeing online for this, it's like people are pointing out that this is the flip side to affirmative action. So that I think the very legitimate point they're making is if somebody's only wondering if people of color get in to a good university or college because of quotas, you should also be wondering if every trust fund baby or anybody who's got money, and it's not even the money that like really filthy rich who can donate buildings, but just a little dirty rich, besides, you know, the legitimate ways of paying for tutoring, giving so they don't have to have a job to take up their time and they can spend more time studying,
or more time at sports because their parents can buy them the equipment and the fees for stuff, whatever.
So then you're talking other than sort of like the natural inherent benefits conferred by being able to spend your money to get people into a place where they are genuinely, as people, better suited for going into that university.
Yeah. So, and I'll make the argument too sometimes that maybe even that extra training doesn't necessarily make them better. It just makes them better at testing or providing the criteria that the universities want to use. But
it makes it likely that the metrics will show that they are better suited for the university. Whether or not, if given the same opportunities, other people would do better is not something that anybody can test for. Yeah.
So if people are wondering if people of color only get in because of quotas, then those same people should also be wondering if anybody who's got a decent amount of money, every trust fund baby, is buying their way in. But that's a spin, and totally legitimate. But the part that I'm not seeing, that I was wondering when I was reading that, is, so the two people they focus on were the famous people, because there's a bunch of rich people, and I'm seeing lots of other scandals about how these are rich people who there's this whole thing about impact investing, and how there's one guy who's sort of the biggest pusher of impact investing, which is the idea that somehow you can take money and invest it in a way that will get you more money, but will actually help people pull themselves up by their bootstraps, was also doing this. So while at one point he was pretending to be trying to help little people and the underserviced or the marginalized or whatever, underprivileged, however you want to put it, at the same time, downstream, he was doing the opposite.
Oh, and this is funny. I don't know if I mentioned this to you or on this channel before, but pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is a really good phrase because it's literally impossible, and it's meant to be impossible by design. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's not how it works. So the phrase is like a joking phrase that means somebody else inherently had to help you, because it's like if you're grabbing your feet and trying to lift yourself out of poverty, right? Like the kind of picture of somebody grabbing their feet and like kind of floating off into the air is meant to be by design impossible. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what the phrase means. But people who are using it, who I disagree with, are actually definitionally, and now when I see it, I feel like they're using it correctly, which is they're saying that people should be doing something that is impossible. You know, just get out of poverty. It's easy. All you have to do is this thing that you actually can't.
So they're using it properly but unintentionally.
Yeah. They're saying, it's not what they're definitionally saying is it's definitely not that easy, but their intent is saying, oh, it shouldn't be that hard.
Oh, it's like the phrase blood is thicker than water.
Oh yeah, it's like a lot of aphorisms.
You want to explain that one again?
Blood is thicker than water. I think it's like the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which so the full phrase just means that actually you can't pick your family, but chosen, sort of actively chosen relationships are more important,
more meaningful.
And there's a lot of stuff.
So all these takes I've been seeing. The one take that I did not see is this. Okay, so Lori Loughlin, who also happens to be friends with the chair of the board of trustees, the university where her daughter got in, and I don't even know what that title means, but you'd think it would help, and it didn't. You know, her daughter is actually on a yacht with the other daughter of the chair of the board of trustees, paid $500,000 for two daughters to get in. Felicity Huffman paid $15,000 for one.
Yeah. Wow. So her exchange rate was bad.
So to me, the story, one of the stories should be that I'm not seeing at all is how ripped off does Lori Loughlin feel? Especially because she knows the chair of the board of trustees, so she should, if she knows who to bribe, it shouldn't cost as much, I'd imagine. Right. So maybe, and some people might argue that, you know, the service that they're getting is different because, I mean, to me, the service is ultimately getting your daughter into in the school that you want. But when you paid $470,000 more than somebody else, I'd be a little TO'd too. Well, see, and so I think the $500,000 was supposed to pay for like some sort of athletics, recruiting, admission, and pretending to be like some sort of a coxswain on a rowing team, and Felicity Huffman only paid for an adjustment of the SAT scores. Yeah. So still, like, it's, I don't know. There's, I guess maybe they're just more worried about going to jail and stuff, but part of me would be just feeling so ripped off that, you know, you've got connections, you've got, you're friends with some bigwig at the school, and you still have to pay $500,000. Part of me thinks for $500,000 you could create an endowment or something like a scholarship at the school, and that would be enough, a legitimate non-get me into jail kind of way to get your kids into school.
Okay, very briefly, I want to say I looked it up, and it does actually, its initial use actually was for a significant amount of time, implying somebody is attempting or has claimed some ludicrously far-fetched or impossible task. So pulling yourself up by your bootstraps was initially, definitionally meant to be something that was fundamentally impossible.
That is hilarious.
And just another fun aphorism that doesn't mean what you think it means. Great minds think alike, but fools rarely differ.
That's kind of cool.
So we say the first half to make us feel better about ourselves when other people share our opinions, and not take the message that the full quote actually means, which is, hey, just because you have the same thought as somebody else doesn't mean it's a good thought. It actually doesn't mean anything other than the fact that you had the same thought as the other person. You should not read into it or ascribe any special importance to it just because one other person agrees with you or a small group of other people agree with you.
That is kind of funny.
And I think the full phrase, while it might make it harder for you to feel good about yourself, is probably actually a lot more important as a lesson to learn. Is that just because somebody else thinks you're right or thinks the same thing as you, it doesn't mean all that much.
All right, that was cool. Thanks for looking that up.
So there we go. Yeah, that other one was off the top of my head. The aphorisms were off the top of my head, but the bootstraps, I looked it up. So it, in common usage, it actually is, you know, something that you can do, which pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is not meant to refer to an impossible task, which makes sense because, I mean, you don't hear people actually using it in that context anymore. But
so it's shifted to mean the opposite of what it was originally intended.
It has. It's the same way that literally has shifted in a way that it has actually been, I don't remember which dictionaries, but acknowledged by the dictionary to mean either literally in true definitional sense, where it is like actual, in fact, really and specifically, but it has also shifted to mean figuratively. Yeah, so one of the definitions of literally is now figuratively.
Oy.
Just, it might be frustrating to you, but keep in mind, one day you'll be dead, and the people who use the term literally to mean figuratively will still be here. So
I think we need another question.
Those people will inherit the words, and they'll make them mean whatever they want them to mean, and we have very little control over that.
Big if true.
There, you know what? I think that's pretty good. I think that if true, yeah, I'll give you credit for that one. Okay.
Thank you.
I went to a philosophy lecture today, which was the second in I think a series of 2. I think we're done it now, but just on death. So that might be why I'm in that particular I don't want to say headspace because I wasn't really thinking about it specifically, but that might be why that thought specifically occurred to me. It was an interesting lecture. I think we should answer another question, and then maybe if we get around to it, if there's time at the end, I can give you a brief rundown of sort of the points made.
All right.
Anyways, our next question comes from Ricky OWO, and they ask, "I'm just wondering, are you guys brothers or best friends?" No. Okay, next question.
All right, so this is something that I've struggled with, right? Because now that we've got more than 700 videos, I think almost 800, it's not reasonable to expect people to watch everything that we've done in order to get an answer to their question, especially if it's, I mean, not especially, even if it's something that we've addressed a number of times before. 700 videos is a lot. And it reminds me of comic books, and I'm going to try to bring this around to justice a little bit, but you know who used to be really good at doing this was when, back in the days before there were graphic novels, when people were trying to create a something more respectable for people to be reading. Yeah. Right? So they collected as books instead of saying, you know, collected comic books, they'd call them graphic novels. Yeah. Comic books would run into the hundreds, right? So you'd be getting, into a series that has like 300 previous issues, and you can't just read all of them to get caught up. And comic book writers would do a great job of getting people caught up and enjoying the issue that they've got. And if they're interested, they can go back, but they don't need to enjoy it.
Yeah, sort of an episodic framework, almost like a monster of the week in TV shows.
Right. And I don't know what the answer is to this, but we've got, I mean, and people have answered this already. Right? It's no secret now, right? I mean, it was a secret for our first 5 seasons.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, if you went all the way back to the beginning of the channel, I think it should have been...
It should be obvious?
Pretty obvious to almost everybody.
All right, so we're father and son. I am father.
I am son.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. Like, it's like this whole explaining what the P and Q and C and A and T are, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and it made a lot of sense earlier when you were younger, and it was obvious that you were younger, that I didn't want you exposed to the potential kind of toxic comments that you see online in general and YouTube specifically.
The slings and arrows.
Yeah, exactly. And now, I mean, it almost seems silly thinking back on it, but you know, it seemed like a much more dangerous kind of thing, and it's still why we don't, you know, show our faces, and why when we're on the video, our faces are obscured, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're definitely not brothers. Are we best friends?
That's.
I would not take it as an insult if I wasn't, and I don't expect it, because it's not normal, I think.
Yeah.
To not have a social circle that's sharing the same kind of stage of life you're at, right?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to extend the courtesy to, I don't know who exactly, but I'm not going to answer that question, just for maybe for your sake, maybe for mine. Well, I don't know. Just I don't think we need to.
Yeah.
We are related to each other. We are not brothers, but we are related to each other. So I think that was answering Ricky's question.
The implied
spirit.
question.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's funny though, because of all the different things that we've done. Like, this is one of those things where it's actually been pretty easy. So it reminds me of Karlos, right? Because it's kind of cool that a game like this, it's a mobile game, right? It's not even that. Part of it is because it's so convenient, so that we can both play it individually on our devices, that it's something that we actually have where we can maintain a common interest.
Yeah.
And for all the things that we don't do at the same time, or that we don't do together, or that we aren't, you know, mutually interested in, that we still have this little thing. And it, you know, like I said, it's been a good excuse over the last few years to sit down and just talk about stuff that's interesting to us.
Mm-hmm. And for parent-child combination, we agree on a surprising amount of stuff. I know a lot of people have more issues discussing like political views, especially like social views with people they're related to. Not just parents, but like that's sort of like a famous like Thanksgiving dinner like taboo is to say the wrong thing and have to get into like a long conversation with like a racist uncle or something.
Speaking of which, I mean, you know, your grandfather, my dad, voted for Rob Ford for Toronto and Doug Ford for Ontario, and is unapologetic about it in the face of every single unreasonable thing that they've done, besides getting stoned, and selling drugs, being racist, all that stuff. So yeah, that's like the perfect example where, you know, there's not a lot of common ground.
Yeah, the generational gap. One thing that I read that was really interesting in my psychology textbook was that people tend to become more conservative as they age, which isn't a surprise to me. I sort of knew that intuitively to be true. But one of the reasons that people become conservative as they age, and this is of course a theory, not like, I think, hard, like rigorously tested science, but is that a lot of people have an awareness of their own mortality salience, and the older you get, the more sort of important that becomes to your life. And the conservative social and political sort of oeuvre gives you something to do about that by especially when you talk about like not warmongering exactly, but like a little bit warmongering, or at least like fueling sort of conflict. You talk about giving people something to do because there's a very clear enemy that is a threat to sort of your life and well-being. And when you talk about, like, for example, like talking about like fighting terrorism really strongly and doing stuff about that, right? The narrative and the perspective that conservatives push is that there's things actively to be fought against, to do something to protect your safety. And so for people who fear of death is becoming more and more relevant for, it gives them it's a belief system that gives them something to do about it.
Now, not that it's not in line with that, because I think it gets the same place. Part of me thinks that the conservatism comes from a place where, as you get older and you see stuff changing around you, you feel less comfortable. Not only are you less equipped to deal with change, right?
Yeah.
Like, the older you get, the more set in your ways. I mean, it's a cliche, but I think it's actually true, where it's harder to make big shifts. It's less you're less comfortable making big changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you see stuff changing around you, it's inevitable, right?
Mm-hmm.
That stuff will change around you. And then conservatism, it's baked into the word. You want to keep things the same.
Yeah, and I obviously I don't think that's a complete explanation. I think there's also talk about the economic aspect, where people with more money generally
want to hold on to it.
Yeah, generally have more stake in policy that lets them keep the highest percentage of their money. Whereas people who are younger traditionally have less money and are more open to the idea of kind of distributing the money around, right?
Yes.
And the way to uncharitably look at both groups is that old rich people are being very miserly with their money and don't want to give any of it away, and that young people don't particularly feel like working for it.
All right, so what's funny is, okay, so the same line. A billionaire is basically Smaug. They are a big old dragon and hoarding and not wanting to give any of it up.
But it's interesting how I think both Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, right, two of the richer, though not richest people alive, because I think that, or at least in net worth, I think the person who has that title is Jeff Bezos now.
Right.
But they both advocate for like social programs and concepts like universal basic income and stuff like that. Well,
sure. They don't want to get eaten alive.
I mean, I would maybe ascribe a little bit more sort of
be a bit more generous towards.
I would be a little bit more
intentions.
generous to say good faith arguments for them. But yeah, no. So I think it's interesting, and I definitely think that curve doesn't last forever. But I think one of the things is that if you're Bill Gates, at least, money doesn't really mean much to you anymore.
Sure.
I could have to imagine, right? I mean, obviously, it means something, but I forget what the calculation was that was done, where it was like if Bill Gates saw like $1,000 bill dropped on the ground, the amount of money he would make in the time he bent over and picked it up would be more than $1,000.
Oh, that's kind of cool and sad at the same time.
I don't remember if that was the statistic, but I think what I do remember, and again, you'd have to check this for yourself, but I think somebody asked him about it, and his answer was something along the lines of, oh, well, I do all this charity work and I know how much $1,000 is worth, so obviously I'd still pick the money up off the ground, right? Just because I realize that the impact it would have, despite the fact that it might not be a high percentage of my money.
How does he ever justify sitting on the toilet?
Well, there was that picture of him that was like him at like a food truck, like waiting in line for burgers or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like that went around, I think, Reddit or something, where people were like very excited about a very rich man waiting in line for burgers.
Big if true.
No, that definitely was true. That's confirmed by Bill Gates, that he did in fact wait in line for burgers.
In productive work, maximizing his income.
Yeah.
All right, that's an interesting turn that we went. That's going in the weeds again, but yeah, that's definitely interesting. I was not aware of that, but it makes sense. I mean, we were talking about the numbers that big.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next question. There's one from Jose Mercado. And Jose says, what are your thoughts on changing the time and days on the device to reset survivor mode and for energy recharge? It's a good thing, which is why it's still in our list of current glitches.
Oh, sorry. I know.
More Bill Gates stuff?
I took a jump. Yeah, I know. I was just looking up really quick, and I know I let you read the question, which I normally don't do. I looked it up, and apparently, using the amount of money he made from the 2017 to 2018 time frame, it was approximately $127 per second. So $1,000 would be worth his time as long as it took him less than a handful of seconds to pick it up. Yeah. So if it takes him like 2 seconds to do it, then that fact would actually not be true. It wouldn't be $1,000. And
so he's got to do it real fast.
And the person
he
also
would be faster snatching it than anybody else.
Yeah, the person also makes the point that Bill Gates makes that money either way, and so in that second, Bill Gates would make a bonus $100, which I think
he'd be picking up pennies.
I mean, yeah, depending on the way that you frame the argument. If you frame the argument the right way, that's sort of not an argument. It's just sort of a fun fact that he would be making more money naturally than he does by picking it up, but in actuality, no matter what happened, he would be making an extra $100 in that period of seconds divided by however many seconds it took for him to pick it up. So that would be actually a slight bump in his net worth, although probably not a particularly large one.
That's funny. All right.
Yeah, so there we go. Now we can get back to the question, which you read, which now feels a little wrong.
Yeah, all right, so Jose Mercado was saying changing time. So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is actually that most people don't remember to be offline when they do it, which is a risk because your device is continually, not continuously, but continually, you know. So this is funny. There's certain things that you learn when you're in school. I mean, most of the stuff I learned in school, I don't remember. Most of the stuff I learned in school was not
for a
useful
pretty good
to me.
reason.
Yeah. But the one thing that stuck with me from English was continually means that it's ongoing. It's not constantly every single moment. Continuously is no change. Continually, it means ongoing. So something that you happens once a day, that can be continual. But continuously is something that's every single moment.
So that's like different verb tenses.
Is it? I have no idea.
No, because there's like past where something was happening, and then something had happened, which is like paster than the past. There's like pluperfect tense. There's perfect, imperfect, and like pluperfect past tense, and I don't remember which one's which exactly. But there's like stuff that happens at a specific moment in the past, something that happens during a frame of time, like in the past, and then something that had happened before another event. So like it's in the past, but it's in the past before something else specifically.
Okay, so in the video we're watching, Luchador Bane is continuously beating on New 52 Shazam until his immunity wears off.
Yeah.
That's
so that's the distinction between those is one of like tense almost, like verb tense almost.
That's cool.
Or maybe not exactly. That might be an incomplete definition or based off of some misconception, but that's what I believe to be true from my understanding.
Okay. I guess I can't add that to next week's video as something I learned, because this is something I learned actually in the video.
That's true.
Big if true. So it wouldn't be that hard. So when you're doing this, the problem is if you do it online, it's not hard for them to do a time check and suspend accounts that are too far off in the time. It hasn't happened yet, but it's not something. So it hasn't been an actual real danger, but I wouldn't encourage it because of just how easy it is for that to happen, and then you end up getting suspended or having some problem with your account. So, and if you do it offline, there's actually zero risk. Like literally zero risk as long as you return your date back to where it should be. And so the other thing though was that used to stop people from doing it was that you could lose the discount gold pack that you used to get every day.
Yeah.
But since update 3.2, I don't think I've had the discount gold pack at all. So that may no longer be an issue. And it's a shame because, again, you know how we talk about the challenge requirements and how the lower the requirements are, the better, because it's a great way for getting newer players in. You're shutting newer players out. Well, not shutting them out, but making it more frustrating potentially if you don't let them get a discount gold pack. And that's a great way to get them back every day and also advance in the game.
Yeah, and I think a discount gold pack is also a great way to sort of set your pace for how much money you should be spending on gold characters versus gear.
Right.
Or other, considerations. Because I think the discount gold pack is a great way of being like, oh, well, if I'm playing a ton, one discount gold pack a day is probably still enough. And then after that, I can just, spend a lot of my money on gear. Or save up for, like, a bigger, like, team pack.
Yeah. Like, again, maybe the next question probably sort of addresses this a little bit in that with so many things to do, it's hard to prioritize what you're going to do.
Yeah. So then maybe we'll naturally segue into the next question. But just before we do, I want to say I appreciate the opportunities that you found to use the term "big if true" in this video. And honestly, it's more than I was expecting. Twice isn't a ton of times, but it's much more than I was expecting in like a 50-minute time frame.
But it's totally like when you meet somebody new. And if you don't say their name a few times, if you don't make the specific effort to use their name, it's so easy to forget. And by the time you see them again, you have to figure out whether it's more embarrassing to ask them what their name is or just pretend you don't know and hope somebody mentions it. And then it gets long enough that it's really embarrassing that you've been talking to them for like weeks or months and stuff. And all of a sudden they realize that you don't know what their name is.
Yeah. It's also like something else. Sorry. I'm trying to find the term for it. I forget what it's called. Okay, there we go. I just found it while you were talking. It's also like the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, which is when you learn about something new, and then you seem to see it everywhere. It suddenly becomes super relevant. Like you're like, oh well, I've never heard that. That's like a really weird like phrase. I've never heard that phrase before today. And then you hear it like twice in the next month or something like that.
Right.
Which is. So it's a little bit like that too. But yeah, well, the entire point is that it's a frequency illusion. It's actually not that you see something or hear something more often. It's just that there's a lot of information that you don't fully understand the context for and that you don't fully process. And so when you've learned something, all of a sudden when you hear it, it is relevant to you. So it's like if you find a new creator and you figure out that they have a lot of like jokes and references and stuff, and then you end up seeing a lot of those jokes and references out in the world. Before, when you saw them, you would probably just ignore them and move on, and now that you're actually attuned and you know what you're looking for, you can see them sort of in the world around you. So it's stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But so that is you're finding applications for the term "big if true" everywhere.
Or I might have been saying it a lot and you just didn't notice until we had to talk about it.
You're saying if I go back and look through it, you've been saying it twice a video?
Something like that, yeah.
I think that might be an incorrect read of the situation.
But we'll never know because we don't go back to watch our videos.
You know what? I'm going to say I'm fairly confident on this one. Now,
you're probably right.
A few moments ago, minutes at this point maybe, we had a great segue into this question, but we got completely sidetracked. So now it's just gonna sort of have to stand on its own merits. But this question comes from strys, STRYS. I don't know if that looks like a set of characters that isn't meant to be maybe pronounced together specifically, but I might be wrong. Especially because it doesn't look like it's formatted like a name, unless it's just somebody's first name with no last name and also no capitalization. But anyways, strys or STRYS or some other pronunciation that this user can feel free to let us know in the comments, asks, why are credit glitches so rare/rarely working?
Yeah, the problem is I think it's been true for a long time, and it's a little bit of that. It's the same flavor as actually what we're just talking about, right? There's a bit of confirmation bias where it feels like, well, I mean, when it's working, it feels like it's working a lot and you don't need to take advantage of it. And then when it's not working, because you want it to be working so badly, you're checking all the time and it just confirms every time you check it and it's not working, it just feels awful.
Yeah, that's true. And I think also, on average, credit glitches, there has been no credit glitches for much longer stretches of time than there have been credit glitches. And I think one of the reasons why is in the same way that it's really bad for us when there are no credit glitches, and there's especially when there's a bunch of new content or stuff to buy with the credits. It's pretty bad for Warner Brothers when there is a credit glitch, because during that time, basically the only thing limiting how far people can get in the game, normally it's a lot of different factors, and especially just how quickly you can generate credits in like per minute, per hour, per day, even if you're playing 24/7. And all of a sudden that calculation gets thrown way off. So if you have a credit glitch that's pretty easy to use and gets you a lot of stuff for a month, that could be literally like decades worth of credits,
Right.
That you would, if you were earning them via the normal channel. So the sort of math for kind of keeping people playing for a significant amount of time to get their stuff gets totally thrown off.
Yeah, so then the lesson from that is that it's so important for all the different things that you could be doing in the game. If you're inclined to use a credit glitch, it's probably most important to prioritize exploiting that glitch over almost anything else while the glitch is still available.
Mm-hmm.
And that ties it back into a previous point.
Agreed. So there we go.
All right, and that's all we've got time for. I think that was the last fight.
Yeah, wow. That's perfect timing. So to finish off, we have a Patreon, and I would say that maybe if you have chosen to listen to us for the past like 50 minutes or so, there's a decent chance that you enjoy our content, and we would super appreciate it if you showed us that you enjoy our content in any of a number of ways. I mean, obviously, subscribing, liking, and especially sort of like commenting and sort of becoming a member of our sort of community here on YouTube is really cool. But another way, sort of an elite tier for those who are able to or willing or it makes sense for their economic situation to support a weird small creator that they like. You can give us some money every month on Patreon. And as always, we need to give a massive thank you to the people who have already made that decision to support us. Do you want to take it away?
Sure. A big thank you to Console Peasant and Eddy G, who are supporting us at the highest last word tier. iProphet, also known as iProphet 3 on YouTube, who's supporting us at the Your Message Here tier. And Shawn, Farrell, and Daniel Simonson, who support us on the credited level. And also Laszlo Georgiades and Chris Wolf.
So thank you guys all so much for your support, and thank you to all of you so much for listening and or watching. We will see you next time. Komoda.